Back in 2018, indie games accounted for 24% of all revenue generated by sales on Steam. And at the time, that already felt like a lot, like some kind of miracle, even though there had already been a few examples of indie games that had blown past every expectation and hit incredible numbers. By 2024, that share had reached 48%, exactly the double, and nearly half of the entire Steam market. All of this in just 6 years, and you might be wondering why, especially because in those same years the number of games released on Steam kept going up, which in theory should have diluted the numbers, spread the money across more titles, made everything harder for everyone, and yet that didn't happen, or at least not for the market as a whole. For individual developers, though, the story is very different, and we'll get to that. But first, I want to talk about how things used to be, so we can better understand how much has changed. Stardew Valley came out in 2016. One developer, Concerned Ape, about 4 years of work, no publisher, no team. $10, it sold 15 million copies in the first 3 years. I think it's about 50 million now. For a long time, that story became the founding myth of the entire indie world. You know, the lone developer who made it by himself to numbers nobody thought possible. The thing is, in 2016, Steam was a different place, because the number of games being released was nothing like it is today. Steam database data suggests around 4,000 games came out in 2016, roughly 11 games every day. And you know how many games came out in 2025? 19,112. That's what, 52 games a day? Obviously, these are rough numbers because Steam doesn't give us exact figures. But do you see how massive that difference is? In 9 years, the number of games released on Steam was 4 times more. And it looks like that number is set to go even higher in 2026. Potentially up to 60 games a day. Although I do think we'll see a sharp drop in releases toward the end of the year because of GTA 6. I mean, who publishes a game at the same time as GTA 6? That would be insane. But back to the main point. Imagine a small indie developer who works for years on a game. Maybe it's actually great, but it still gets buried because on the day it launches, 50 or 60 other games came out alongside it. So we started from numbers that seemed good, and already after looking a bit closer, they don't seem quite so good anymore. So let's go deeper. Okay, so 48% of Steam revenue in 2024 going to indie games. This sounds great, but there's one detail that changes everything. Most of that money comes from a very small number of titles. Black Myth Wukong alone generated around $1 billion on Steam in 2024. Palworld around 500 million. To be clear, these are estimates like I said before, but if they're in the right ballpark, it would mean that all other indie games combined, everything else that came out in 2024, earned less than Black Myth by itself. That means roughly 0.5% of titles generate 80% of total revenue. So, to answer the original question, the indie market as a whole is doing great, is doing amazing. Most indie developers individually, not so much. Take another data point. 49.8% of games released in 2024 received fewer than 10 reviews on Steam. Fewer than 10 reviews means, by standard industry estimates, fewer than 300 copies sold. And to be clear, it's not that these games are necessarily bad. Some are bad, but many are decent or interesting or genuinely original. Nobody just found them. So I think this is the main problem in the current indie game market. It's not pricing, it's not the average quality of games. It's the fact that you can make a good game and still disappear without a trace. Which brings up the obvious question, what actually works? Well, spoiler, I don't know, otherwise I'd be a millionaire by now. But we can look at the genres that have been doing well lately. So the honest answer here is complicated because what's working and what's oversaturated, often overlap. Take roguelikes. For a while, it seemed like any game with procedural elements and repeatable runs was destined for success. Hades in 2020 redefined the game. Slay the Spire had already done it with deck-building format. Vampire Survivors in 2022 practically invented a subgenre by itself. The so-called bullet heaven or auto shooter, where you don't even control the shooting, just the movement. A lot of developers jumped into that space, and then, as always, the saturation hit. In the first half of 2024, Vampire Survivors likes were already in decline, with overall review numbers dropping sharply. The genres that are still holding up well are open world survival craft, city builders, farm sims, roguelike deck builders, the traditional kind, not bullet heaven, and simulation in general. And there's a reason for this. There are genres that big studios ignore, not because they can't make them, but because it doesn't make sense for them financially. These genres need ongoing post-launch support, continuous iteration, listening to the community. It's the kind of effort a studio with a massive budget struggles to justify. A small team that genuinely believes in the project, though, could potentially live off the game for 10 years. So I would say that the genres worth exploring for indie developers are the ones the big studios don't bother with. Maybe that's part of why we keep seeing cozy games come out that simulate everyday's life in a light way. You're running a coffee shop or a supermarket, and then there's the thing that's been coming through louder and louder in the 2025 data. Repo sold 16.8 million copies in 2025. Peak sold 15.7 million copies, more than 3.7 million in August alone. Schedule 1 sold 8 million copies. Again, I know I keep saying this, but I consider these numbers estimates, because the real figures are held by Steam and the developers themselves. But based on these estimates, those three games together, all indie, all under $20, moved 42 million units. Monster Hunter Wilds, Capcom's flagship release, costs what? $60? Years of development, 6.1 copies on Steam sold for a Monster Hunter game. Sure, Monster Hunter Wilds also sold on console, but the gap is still something to sit with. So what do Repo and Peak and Schedule 1 have in common? They are all cooperative multiplayer games. You play them with friends. They look great on Twitch and YouTube and TikTok or Instagram. Every session has that moment, the moment that's worth clipping. The play with friends factor has become the single most reliable predictor of viral success on Steam. It's worth pausing on this. Players aren't just buying a game, they're buying a shareable experience. They're buying something they can show their friends and say, look at this insane thing that just happened to me. Games that generate those moments spread organically because every video becomes advertising, every clip becomes a trailer. And that's the world we live right now. A content creator's playthrough matters more than a marketing agency. The algorithm decides whether your game succeeds or not. So yeah, the algorithm. Let me come back to the main problem. 50 to 60 games a day on Steam. In 2025, 29% of games launched with fewer than 1,000 wishlists. 66% had fewer than 10,000. It's not that players are less curious than before. It's that Steam's algorithm decides who you see and who you don't, and its main criterion is already being successful. If you launch with good reviews and a strong conversion rate in the first few hours, the algorithm amplifies you. If you launch in silence, the algorithm ignores you. Less time on wishlist, more conversions. Why? Partly because games with low organic traction tend to sit in wishlist purgatory for a long time with nobody pushing them. Partly because interest builds better in short, concentrated windows. So the games that tend to perform best are the ones that have been on Steam for fewer days before launch, and yeah, of course, with more wish lists. But the real point is this: for most of indie history, making a good game was enough. There were enough eyes, enough space for an honest game to find its audience. That period is over. Not in the sense that making a good game no longer matters. It still absolutely does. But it's not enough anymore. Marketing, meaning building a community before launch, having a social media presence, bringing in content creators, all of that had become as much a part of the job as development itself. I'm sorry to say it, but that's where we are right now. So basically, something that comes through pretty clearly when you look at what works and what doesn't. Players are less willing to pay for a long game they don't trust. They're more willing to pay for something short, affordable, with a strong visual or mechanical identity. The psychological point is this: at $10, I know what I'm risking. At $60 for a new franchise I know nothing about, I'll think about it for 2 weeks and then maybe wait for a sale. Yeah. Games that explain themselves in 30 seconds have a massive advantage. Not because players are dumb, but because attention is scarce and trust has to be earned before someone even reaches the Steam page. The video, the clip, the meme have to do the work before the game does it. What people are looking for in indie games, more or less consciously, is something the big games don't do anymore. An unusual perspective, an unexpected mechanical system, a story that doesn't follow the manual. Cozy games feel a specific need for decompression. Roguelikes feel a need for mastery and variety. Short narrative games feel a need for concentrated emotion. And above all, there's one element that indie games are known for. Something players feel even if they can't always put into words. The sense of going against the grain, against the system. Only a few things seem fairly certain for the near term. Cooperative multiplayer will continue to be the genre with the highest density of viral successes. Not the only viable genre, but the one with the best safety net between organic reach and conversion. Chinese developed games will start taking up significant space on Steam's global market. Trust me on this one. The production quality of Chinese developers is growing fast and the global market is giving them real credibility. Generative AI in game dev is already part of the workflow for many studios. For small teams, it can be a real lever for asset production and testing. But it's also fueling a flood of near automatically generated games that makes the discovery problem worse for everyone. Dozens of AI-generated titles show up on Steam every week. I mean, they don't make money, but they make noise. The genres abandoned by the big studios, city builders, tactical RPGs, deep management sims, remain among the safest option for small teams. Not glamorous, not viral, but with a hungry and loyal player base that major publishers are no longer serving. And there's the thing I don't have a clear answer to. Steam's algorithm rewards whoever is already succeeding. This creates a system where the rich get richer and the newcomers have to work even harder and harder to earn visibility with the same tools. That could change if Valve decided to step in. There's no sign that's happening, and I can't tell you whether anything will shift in the short term. What I can say for certain is that making indie games has never been easy or guaranteed, but the nature of the risk has changed. It's no longer I make a mediocre game and it doesn't sell. It's I make a good game, nobody finds it, and I don't know exactly what I should have done differently. That second version is harder to accept. The market has become brutal, or maybe it has always been. If you want to share your own journey as a developer or the challenges you've run into, write it down in the comments below. And since we are all slaves to the algorithm, hit a like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.